Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Rydell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahold, and today we're talking about several different things, starting off with Sharrif Floyd. If you haven't been keeping track, about a week ago now, Sharrif Floyd put up an Instagram post. If you're not familiar with Instagram, I don't know. It's the 21st century, maybe 22nd. I don't know. What's the 21st century? You should probably figure
It's
that
the
out at this
21st
point.
century.
Yeah, I know. I
Yeah.
understand. I'm saying, but you should probably
There you
figure
go.
that out by now. And he put up an Instagram post, and basically what that is he threw up a picture of several Mike Zimmer quotes and kind of put some blame on Mike Zimmer for how he's been feeling lately about his injury. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. After that, we'll talk about Kendall Wright, who is being wined and dined as we speak, possibly. There's been reports circulating that he's been taken out to eat with the Vikings, and the former Chicago Bear and Tennessee Titan receiver might be a Viking by the time this show is over, for all we know. So we'll talk a little bit about him and what he could mean to the Vikings, and we'll finish up with some Teddy Bridgewater news. There was a quote that came out about a week ago. I believe it was Brian Murphy from the Star Tribune that said it about how Mike Zimmer is kind of in mourning over the whole Teddy Bridgewater situation. So we'll talk a little bit about that and finish up there with some questions, and that's kind of how we'll do today. So, starting with Sharrif Floyd, Drew, why don't you give me an outline of exactly what I was kind of alluding to there when I kind of stumbled all over my words?
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty normal for you, isn't it? Sharrif Floyd's Instagram 6 days ago, he put up a screenshot of a few Zimmer quotes, and they were actually from right before when he went into surgery, where Mike Zimmer was asked about Sharrif Floyd, and he said, "We feel good about the guys we have now. He's played," referring to Sharrif. 12 plays this year? He hasn't played. And then he was asked the next day about his status for a Green Bay game. Zimmer then said, "I'm kind of used to it," saying that Floyd is going to be out. So clearly, kind of not looking on the situation very well for Zimmer there. And like we said before, he's kind of a tell it like it is sort of guy. If he thinks something, he's going to say it. He's not going to hold back any judgment. So he kind of rushed to judgment on this one just because we know now that Floyd's surgery was actually mishandled by the surgeon, and there was a nerve issue that was created during the surgery. So that's kind of why Floyd's recovery has not gone very smoothly. And so this probably doesn't reflect very well on Mike Zimmer, and it's probably one of the low points of his career, being that he was very judgmental toward a player and kind of assuming a lack of motivation as to why he's not returning, instead of what really happened, a surgical error that created a nerve issue. That's one of the harder things to come back from as a football player.
There is one kind of note here in Zimmer's defense, and for what it's worth, I'm not defending Zimmer here at all, but I do think it's important to get all the facts out there before we kind of elaborate on this. Zimmer reportedly, wasn't intentionally being hard on Floyd. He just didn't have all the information, right? This is a situation where he said a bunch of kind of harsh things, I suppose, that's Mike Zimmer. You have to give and take a little.
He just could have been frustrated at the situation as a whole, but
right.
I think it's one of those things where the way he said it, the way it came out of his mouth, it seemed very derogatory towards Floyd, and whether or not that wasn't his intention, it's a bad look either way.
Part of the problem there is that when as someone who is a writer and someone that has worked very hard on trying to create a specific tone for himself, if you're someone who's very stern and kind of intense, like Mike Zimmer is, I mean, you guys have all seen the GIF where he's like, kind of does like the stare,
oh yeah,
you know what I'm talking about. Like, he's a hard-nosed coach, and that's kind of who he is. He kind of gives off this perception that every quote that he says is law, right? And so it can come off very hurtful when he says these harsh things about players. And for what it's worth, Sharrif Floyd has always been a very fun-loving guy. I remember probably 2 years ago now, he said he did like an Ask Me Everything on Twitter, and I asked him if he'd ever stepped on a Lego before, and he responded, and it was really I thought it was hilarious because I wasn't expecting this, this humongous football player to be so casual and so much fun. And I think that's kind of a side that we saw from Sharrif Floyd in this Instagram too, is that,
yep.
He's not just a football player, and that's something that we have talked about on this show a number of different times. Is that yes, these players they do make millions. Yes, they do have humongous bodies and can probably take out just about anyone in their path, but they still have feelings, you know. And I'm not going to be someone to tell you how someone feels, but it certainly seems like that Sharif Floyd was alluding to in this case, that he was very hurt by the situation, and he's not just physically hurt, he's also mentally like hurt from this situation as well. It's kind of one of those like, how is he going to dig himself out of this hole? And he said this in the Instagram post, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, he just kind of said, he's going to stand up. It's time to share my story, and then his last hashtag is I will rise again. So I think he seems kind of motivated now to sort of come back, and maybe it's literally just to prove Mike Zimmer wrong. I don't know what the motivation is exactly, but I do know that, whether Zimmer had said these things or not, it just seems like it was one of those situations that Floyd just wasn't going to work out in Minnesota, and a lot of that's just because of the error by the surgeon. Like, it sucks that it worked out that way, but hopefully he can find a place and land and make his NFL career, or I guess remake it, because when he's healthy, he's a very, very good football player. We know that. He made a bunch of impact plays. In 2015, he was phenomenal. So there's no doubts about his ability on the football field. It's just getting that knee back and healthy, and I think he can be an impact player again. It doesn't look like it'll happen in Minnesota, unfortunately. But again, this is the way this is said, and this obviously is just one side of it. We don't know. I don't think Zimmer has commented on it yet or has been asked to. But it's not a good look for him, just because it looks like he either did not have all the information and kind of rushed to judge, or he just, when he expressed his frustration with the situation, it kind of seemed derogatory to Floyd. And either way, it's just not a good look.
This is definitely a situation where Mike Zimmer did not have all this information. That can be concluded at this point in time. Whether it's a bad look is up for us to judge, I think. So, to me, this is a horrible look. And it's not something that Mike Zimmer can really do anything about it at this point other than apologize. I mean, the thing that I love about Mike Zimmer, and I will always love this about Mike Zimmer, is that when he makes a mistake, he generally speaking is going to apologize for it, and he's going to try to correct it immediately. And he does that with everything. It's not just quotes that he says, it's also his performance on the field, his performance calling plays. Everything that he has done in Minnesota has been kind of a step-by-step process, and he learns from his mistakes as well as anyone. I can't remember if it was, we've talked about this on the show before, but Scott Fujita, I believe, was the linebacker who said you got to get a coach like Mike Zimmer, because what Mike Zimmer does so well is he puts things on himself as opposed to putting it on someone else. And in this situation, it seems like he was putting too much on Sharif Floyd to get back. And now one thing that I will say about this is that when you're as big as Sharif Floyd is, you're going to have knee issues just inherently. That's just kind of part of the problem. Yeah. And, when you're asked to play at such a huge, when your playing weight is supposed to be around 300 pounds, I don't know what Sharif Floyd's number is exactly. I believe it was like 285 or something like that. You're going to have these knee issues inherently, and then it gets even worse when the surgeon is the one that screwed it up. So this is a kind of a perfect storm situation for the Vikings, where Mike Zimmer didn't have all the information. Floyd was probably hurt and maybe could have played through it, and then things got way, way worse. So now it ends up looking like Mike Zimmer was being a jerk about the whole thing, when really he was probably trying to just motivate Floyd to get back on the field. That's kind of the guy that he is, and that's the guy that he always has been, where he's a 2-up, 1-down kind of guy, where he'll say something negative about you to the media with the hope of you figuring it out and getting back on the field. We've seen him do this with Treadwell now. We saw him do this with Jarius Wright. We've seen him do this with pretty much everyone that I've seen on this team has gotten a Mike Zimmer heat quote at some point in time. But Trey Waynes, oh my God, he is absolutely shredded Trey Waynes. He shredded Xavier Rhodes back in the day with the whole boxing glove thing. I mean, he has no problem saying something negative about his players, hoping that they'll take it as motivation, and that has worked. So with Floyd, like you said before, I think that's an important point, that Floyd could take this as motivation, and maybe it's just to stick it to Mike Zimmer. Hey, that might be what Mike Zimmer wants. He might want Floyd to stick it to him, because Mike Zimmer comes off as a very caring person. He's also very intense. But if he's anything like me, when you say something negative about someone, generally speaking, it's not because you hate them or that you're attacking them personally. It's because you're trying to get the best out of them. So that might be the best thing for Floyd, is to get that out there now, kind of push away from that situation and just move forward into kind of the next phase of his career here.
Yeah, I mean, I like all of that. It's just we don't know Floyd as a person. We don't know. There's more details to this we don't know.
Right.
And maybe Mike Zimmer has personally apologized to Floyd. We don't know a lot of these things. We're just using the information that we're given. But it looks like there were mistakes made at least on Zimmer's side to some degree. And I mean, now it's in the past, and Zimmer can't really do anything about it. But I think I can speak for both of us that we're rooting for Floyd to kind of revive his career and find a place in the league, because we know how good he is and we know how productive he can be on the field.
He's definitely a player that can get it done on the field for sure. He's got one of the quickest first steps to that 3 technique spot in the league.
Yep.
Period. I personally have compared that first step to Gerald McCoy, kind of that explosion off the line of scrimmage. So he definitely has the capacity for excellence. It's just a matter of how healthy is he and how healthy will he ever be again. He says he's going to rise again, and I'm going to take him at his word here. So we'll see what happens with Floyd, and we wish him the best. So from there, let's jump into Kendall Wright. Kendall Wright is a slot receiver. For those of you who are not familiar with his career, he's a former first-round pick out of Baylor. He started his career with the Tennessee Titans and was a very talented player coming out of college. He hasn't really done a whole lot since then. He's been a solid receiver. He has not been a first-round pick caliber receiver. He most recently played for the Chicago Bears, and now he's in Minnesota. Apparently, according to reports that he's being wined and dined. I believe it was Darren Wolfson that said something about this. Yeah. So if Wolfson's saying it, that's generally speaking, that's a good sign for it being true. So what do you think about Kendall Wright, and do you see him in purple and gold first and foremost?
I mean, I see him as a solid replacement for Jarius Wright. I think that's what they're going for here. A slightly cheaper option, perhaps. As a slot guy. Again, I'm not sure what exactly the value is going to be, but I would assume it's slightly cheaper. Part of the reason maybe that Wright did not work out in Minnesota is they just didn't think they could afford him. I think it was $4.5 million or something was the cap it for Wright this year. So I would assume that's kind of the motivation for this move. But yeah, I think it's just a guy that he has talent, hasn't quite worked out into what most people expected for production in his career, but clearly I think he can play. Be a nice complementary option in there for Thielen and Diggs, and also kind of some insurance for Treadwell, because we still have a lot that we don't know about him.
Sure.
Can he be the third option and then have either Thielen or Diggs stay in the slot, or will Wright end up being the slot guy for the most of the season while Thielen and Diggs stay outside? I think at least Wright gives you that option. Kendall Wright does anyway. He gives you that option and kind of that backup plan. So again, he's not signed yet as far as we know, but I think it would be at least, it would behoove the Vikings to really look into it, and if the price is right, make that offer.
Yeah, the price is right, no pun intended.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even think about that.
I did.
The price is right. I see. I'm just so good at making jokes that I don't even notice when I do them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Kendall Wright. I like this player a lot, and I like the fit for the Vikings too, because the Vikings need a slot receiver right now. They've got their 2 outside guys in Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs. Laquan Treadwell always has projected as an outside receiver, and he's done his best work there as well. I don't think that signing Kendall Wright takes away from, like, for example, bringing back Michael Floyd, because Floyd is also an outside receiver for the most part. He has played some in the slot, but what the Vikings are looking for right here is basically a replacement for Jarius Wright, and Kendall Wright, it's just a coincidence that they have the same last name, actually fits the bill pretty well. It's a matter of how much money they want to pay him, like Drew said, I think. And like you said, with Jarius Wright being released, remember, Wright was on his second contract with the Vikings, so he wasn't being paid like a rookie anymore. And so the Vikings can, in theory, shed some cap space here by releasing Jarius and bringing in Kendall. And that's kind of how that works out well for the Vikings, if that's what they decide to do. Now, it seems like that the team is very serious about this because, as people have been alluding to on Twitter, generally speaking, when the Vikings have concluded a meeting with someone, there is media updates coming out almost immediately, and we haven't seen anything yet. So the Vikings have been keeping this in-house. They've been keeping it very quiet. And I don't know what the situation is right now, but it sounds like Kendall Wright could very well become a Viking, sooner rather than later. And I think that's in the best interest of this team because, again, this is a very talented player, a former first-round pick. I love former first-round picks because you never really know what you're going to get from them when they're motivated again. And so Wright has had an interesting career where it started off in Tennessee and it was okay. He did fine. and then he went to Chicago, and it was not awesome. And now he has the opportunity to potentially come and play for the Minnesota Vikings with Kirk Cousins as his quarterback. To me, that's a perfect landing spot for Kendall Wright. And I can, I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like that's a good win. That's a win-win situation for both the Vikings and Kendall Wright in this situation.
Yeah, I think it could be, for sure. At the very least, it's something that could work out both ways. And it's just, I think the one way it would not be a win, for, I guess, the one person that it might not be a win for would be Laquan Treadwell, just because I think this is sort of his chance now that, okay, I'm the third receiver going in. Here's my chance to prove it and make myself worthy of a first-round pick. Kendall Wright's kind of been there in that, I believe he's a former first-round pick, like you said, a guy that didn't quite live up to those expectations. So both those guys are in similar spots where they kind of have a lot to prove here. So I would imagine that camp battle, if this comes true, would be, it'll be fun to watch because and then they won't be playing the same role necessarily on the field, but I think their snaps would be, that third role of, in the hierarchy of snaps, I think is what they'd be fighting for. So if that does come to fruition, I'm looking forward to that camp battle for sure. Both guys, lots of talent, also a lot to prove. That would be fun. I think it would be a benefit as a whole for both the Vikings and Wright to, that opportunity for Wright to kind of prove himself again, and an opportunity for the Vikings to find another reliable slot guy a la Jarius Wright.
Yeah, you bring up the snap count thing, and that's kind of important here, I think, because generally speaking, there's never going to be enough footballs to go around for 4 different receivers, right? People have been talking about Odell Beckham Jr. a lot lately, and like what it would take to bring him to Minnesota. The prime kind of subject that has came up on Twitter a lot is people are talking about switching him and Stephon Diggs around. But in theory, if you were to have all 3 of those guys, meaning Diggs, Thielen, and Beckham, there isn't enough footballs to go around for all 3 of those guys. That's why you bring in a guy like Kendall Wright instead, who has a lot of talent and a lot of ability, but he doesn't need targets, right? Like Odell Beckham Jr. demands targets. You need to get him the ball maybe 10 times a game. That's just kind of the type of receiver that he is. Kendall Wright is not that type of receiver. He's more of he's a slot guy that's going to basically be a first down machine like Jarius Wright. And I think that he has greater potential on the outside, which makes him a little bit more versatile and potentially better than Jarius Wright. So this could be a cap release situation. This could be a situation where the Vikings simply believe that Kendall is better than Jarius. This could be a number of different things, but overall it looks like this is a positive situation for the Vikings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would agree with that. And it's just I'm looking forward to because I still like Stacey Coley. I like Caleb Jones. I like Brandon Zylstra is another name that I don't know if we mentioned on the show yet, but the former Concordia Moorhead receiver who played in the CFL last year, who I think the Vikings have on a futures contract now. Another dark horse to make some noise in that receiver spot this year. So I'm looking forward to this room. And if Kendall Wright's added, I think there's some serious potential there outside of Diggs and Thielen.
That's an interesting point that we can probably touch on a little bit before jumping into the Teddy Bridgewater situation. The idea of competition, right? No pun intended on right.
Yeah, we could just say right like every 3 words and just say no pun intended.
Maybe I will. You can't stop me from doing that.
I honestly wouldn't be surprised if you did that right now.
Yeah. Anyways, so competition is a good thing, right? Anytime you can get multiple receivers in the room that are very talented. I mean, we know that Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs are 1A and 1B. That's known at this point. Now, what happens after that is kind of up to the rest of these guys in the room. So if I'm Treadwell, I'm looking at this as motivation. Treadwell should know at this point that he probably should be seen as more valuable than Kendall Wright, just because he has the capacity to play on the outside, whereas Kendall Wright has never been a guy that has done that at a very high level. Now, it depends moving forward here on snap counts and that kind of you can't get the ball to everyone on every single play. You can only throw 1 football per play. That's how it works. Right. It sounds obvious, but I feel like people
that's some good analysis right there. There's 1 ball in every play.
Yeah, but
that's why you all listen to the show.
Exactly, but is there not some truth to that? I feel like people
there is truth to it.
People try. Yeah, there's truth to it, but I'm saying there are people out there who just don't seem to understand that you can't get the football to every single player on every single play. It just doesn't work like that. And so when you have all these premier receivers, it's playing Madden. That's what it is. Like, I mean, I don't know if you've ever done this before, but like for me, when I play Madden, I open it up, I start with the franchise, and then I try to kind of build around what the Vikings already have. And so I'll go out and get like Julio Jones, for example. But now, seeing what the Vikings do have, I wouldn't go out and get Julio Jones because you already have Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs. If you're going out to get a third receiver, it's unnecessary. It's just it's too much, and you don't need all that. You just need someone, and that's why I think.
Because when you're playing Madden, you want to look back on your season that you've played out, and you want all their stats to be still good, right? Like you're looking at all their numbers. You want like 3 1,000-yard receivers or something like that.
Yeah.
It's impossible to do, and they're all really, really good. Like it's impossible anyway to have 3 1,000-yard receivers on the same team. Like
it's just not. I mean, it's not impossible in Madden, but it's very, very unlikely. In real life, that's just probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
Unless you're the Patriots in 2007 with Randy Moss, Wes Welker, and was there a third one in there?
There probably was. That was 11 years ago now, and I was 12.
How crazy is that, by the way? That was so long ago. I was 16 at that point. Yeah. It's just insane. So, all right, from there, let's hop into Teddy Bridgewater. The quote that I saw from Brian Murphy, I don't have it up in front of me, but basically what it was saying is kind of the outline of it was that Mike Zimmer is kind of in mourning over the whole situation of losing Teddy Bridgewater, saying things along the lines of, I thought that we would be together forever, that kind of Zimmer hitched his wagon to Bridgewater when they drafted him, and there was kind of an expectation there that he was going to be the franchise quarterback, the quarterback of the future. And I think that for the longest time, everyone always believed that was going to be the case. No pun intended. But then Case Keenum came along.
God.
And then Sam Bradford came along, and now it's Kirk Cousins. So there's been this quarterback carousel that has sort of ultimately led to Teddy Bridgewater no longer being in Minnesota. He came out and said that he didn't, he felt disrespected in the whole situation, which was very unlike Teddy Bridgewater to really say anything on the situation. He hadn't, people have been saying stuff behind his back or
I don't know
Twitter.
I don't know if he said that explicitly, but I think that was the vibe he sort of gave out. Was what
the media wrote about it, right?
Yeah, sure, yeah. Because I believe what happened was he was sort of promised his starting role back after he got back from injury.
Right.
And then, Keenum outperformed himself, and Sam Bradford played really well, and it just became one of those things that, okay, what's best for the team right now? Is it to uphold the promise to Teddy, or is it to play the quarterback who's on fire? Like, it's just, I think that's kind of what it came down to for the organization, and unfortunately that meant kind of breaking that promise, so to speak, to Teddy.
I mean, how crazy is that situation, though? Like, looking back now, after it's finally over, it seems like, with Kirk Cousins officially being, under contract and undeniably being the quarterback of the future now, how crazy is that situation? Bridgewater gets hurt. You go out and trade for Sam Bradford. And by the way, the Vikings never got compensation from I believe that they get a pick back for him signing, like a conditional pick for him signing elsewhere. But the Vikings, basically, they traded a first-rounder to get Sam Bradford. He ends up in Arizona, which that guy, nobody is better at cashing in than Sam Bradford's agent. Nobody is better than him. Then you lose Case Keenum to Denver. He's also going to be a starter. So the Vikings basically, they literally had 3 quarterbacks who are likely to start next season. Bridgewater for the Jets, Bradford for the Cardinals, Keenum for the Broncos, and now they bring in Kirk Cousins for the Vikings. So there was a time period where the Vikings literally were kind of not necessarily in possession, but were surrounded by 4 starting quarterbacks. That's the craziest thing I've ever seen. Like in football, that does not happen. Think about
I think it speaks to the clout the Vikings have now. When you have a 13-3 season with so much talent around the quarterback position, it becomes a very desirable spot to play the position, right?
Right.
That's why Kirk Cousins took less money to play with the Vikings than he would have if he signed with the Jets. Vikings offered less because they knew they had the leverage of being a much better team, much better run organization, right, much more competitive, and a chance to win a Super Bowl. And I think that's kind of, there was other quarterbacks interested as well. Now you got Trevor Siemian, who started a bunch of games. And there was interest in other guys as well. But, when you have that many options, it was one of those, I think I said this multiple times in the show, Rick Spielman, Rob Brzezinski, the front office, they couldn't have gone wrong here, I don't think.
No.
They would have picked any one of those guys. It would not have been the wrong decision. There might have been a decision that was more right than others. But point being is they were going to be competitive now and in the future, regardless of who their choice was. And the fact that, we're kind of getting off the Teddy topic here, but I guess what we're to kind of tie it all back is everything worked out almost too well for the Vikings, and that's why Teddy. I'm serious, right? Like
you're not wrong.
I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong. It all worked out too well, and then it ended up kind of getting in the way of Teddy's comeback to football.
Yeah, and as Vikings fans, we're not used to that being a thing, right? I mean, it's very strange that things worked out as well as they did for the Vikings, or at least they appear to have worked out very well for the Vikings. I mean, there's still room for a lot of different bad things to happen, and hopefully that's not going to be the case. But this is a situation, and it's unprecedented. It's historical. Excuse me. This type of thing is never going to happen again. Like you're never going to see a quarterback situation quite like the Vikings just had, where quite literally 3 guys could have started against the New Orleans Saints. You could have had 3 different quarterbacks start that game. There was reports that Sam Bradford was healthy. Case Keenum obviously ended up starting that game, and it seemed like they picked the right quarterback for that game. And then you've got Teddy Bridgewater, who apparently could have started as well. And so you got 3 guys there that could have started, 1 guy that did start, and none of them are in Minnesota.
Wow.
That's exactly. Wow. I don't even know what else to say about that situation. It's crazy. Yeah. And I think that, to get back to Teddy Bridgewater here, I also thought that the Vikings were going to be attached to the hip to this guy forever.
Yep.
And I wish him the absolute best, because nobody handled that. Nobody could have handled that situation quite like Bridgewater did. He did a hell of a job, and it really breaks my heart that he's not going to be the starting quarterback for the Vikings moving forward.
I mean, that's why you draft the quarterback in the first round. You anticipate him being the starter for the future. And after 2 seasons, it really looked like that was the case. NFC North championship, what should have been a playoff win. I mean, he had everything going for him. It looked like the growth was going upwards, right? There was the exponential growth. That's what I saw anyway, from Teddy Bridgewater. And then you get the terrible knee injury, and the Vikings are forced to try to stay competitive because they're in a state where they're outside of the quarterback position. They were still really good at the time, talent everywhere. So they trade for Bradford. Things go haywire in 2016 thanks to injuries. And then another injury to Bradford in 2017 forces Keenum into the starting role. He explodes. Vikings really didn't have a choice but to stick with what they had with Keenum there. And it's unfortunate. You can't just break a 10-game winning streak like that. So, I mean, a lot of this is not Teddy Bridgewater's fault at all. Actually, none of it really is.
It's just all out of his control completely.
Yeah, it's just the injury sucks, and the way that his market kind of decreased too, because his base salary is only $5 million with the Jets, up to $15 million in incentives. But I think, and again, it's like Street Floyd. We all are rooting for him to figure things out with the Jets, get that starting role, and make some noise.
Absolutely. So from there, let's move into questions for the week. Do we have any questions?
We do have a couple.
Right,
I'll bring them back up here. They are from, let's see, our first one from Eli at Skullseas. Big shout out to him actually for committing to take his studies to the University of Minnesota.
Congratulations. Degree. Atta baby.
So shout out to Eli. He's asking us about a trade for potentially Odell Beckham Jr. He says, what would you say to trading one of our offensive weapons plus picks for a true star? And his example given is, Rudy for Gronk, Rudy and a pick for Gronk, Diggs and a pick for Odell Beckham. How do you feel about that?
See, I don't like the idea of trading anyone for it. Again, I think that's like playing Madden. I really do. I think the Vikings were in a situation where they could, give off the appearance a little bit like they were playing Madden because the reputation was so high. They had so much salary cap space, the new stadium, all of these different things working for them where they could kind of pick and choose what they wanted, and then ultimately they got what they wanted in Kirk Cousins. But as it stands with trades are not something that generally happen all that much in the NFL. I know we've seen a lot of them lately, but I don't see that being, the case moving forward here. And so I think that what it would take to get Odell Beckham is probably a first-round pick and then either Adam Thielen or Stephon Diggs, one of those 2 guys. And I personally am against that type of deal just because I don't see that working out well for the Vikings. I don't want to bring in a guy who has a history of being emotional or overly emotional, I suppose, when we already know Stephon Diggs. And yes, Stephon Diggs is a very passionate player. We've seen him get personal fouls for kind of excessive passion, I suppose. I don't, because I can't hear him on the broadcast, so I don't know what he's saying. But it's excessive something going on there with Diggs, where I would rather have Diggs in there and know his personality and how he fits in the locker room than trade him away and bring in Beckham Jr. and have him fighting with the net on the sideline in Minnesota instead. That's just the guy. That's how I feel about the situation. I know that there's a lot of people that disagree with me on that, and I've seen that on Twitter because I actually stated my case here on that. But I personally am against Odell Beckham Jr. I would also. Did he mention Gronk in there as well?
Yeah, Kyle Rudolph plus picks for Gronk was also one of the options.
See, that's another one where, in that situation, like I would love to have Rob Gronkowski. Don't get me wrong, but I really like Kyle Rudolph too. Like I believe that he's well rounded and that he can do a lot.
And you
of
like Dallas Goedert.
And I do like Dallas Goedert. Yeah, so I mean, I don't see the purpose. I guess I understand the premise. I understand that Odell Beckham's really good. I understand that Rob Gronkowski is really good. I understand these are Hall of Fame caliber players, assuming their careers continue to go up as they have. But I like where the Vikings are at right now, and so I'm sticking with Diggs and Rudolph.
See, I am very interested. I would be interested in an Odell Beckham trade if he wasn't so, if his demands for that new contract weren't so high. Yeah. Because I don't know how realistic that is, given the Cousins contract, to even bring in Odell and then make room for his giant contract at receiver. I think he wants like $18 million a year or something like that.
Yeah, I just don't see that happening at all.
Now, if he was demanding a much smaller contract, say something a little bit north of what Diggs would want when he needs his extension, then okay, let's maybe think about this, because Odell Beckham is arguably the best receiver in the league as far as pure talent goes.
I agree with that.
So, in the way he has, what happened to the Giants when he was out last year, right? He clearly has a bunch of value to him. So, again, it's about the money right now. Money is tight all of a sudden with the Cousins signing for the future here. So, I think the same thing goes for Gronk, although I would not be completely opposed to a Gronk deal for like 1 year. Because...
But then you lose Rudolph.
There has been some retirement rumors with Gronk. If they can draft a tight end, say, I don't know, Dallas Goedert maybe. Groom him under Gronk for a season. Gronk retires to go join the WWE or whatever he wants to do. Then you have Dallas Goedert in there at tight end along with David Morgan. That's still a pretty solid combo. So I think, I'm more open to Gronk for 1 year than I am for Odell Beckham and then paying his contract. But you can get a Hall of Fame player like that, giving up a, almost superstar player and a pick for a for sure superstar player, I think is probably worth it. It's just financially with Odell Beckham, it doesn't really work. That's
exactly how I feel as well. It financially doesn't work out as swimmingly as people are trying to make it out to seem, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And we can move on to our final question here. From Seth Mitzel at SkullVikings_7. Would you be willing to trade up for Isaiah Wynn in the draft? The believe offensive lineman from Georgia.
Yeah.
Looks like he's being mocked kind of mid-first round at this point. So how do you feel about him? Would you trade up?
So this is kind of a question that it begs to ask you, how much do the Vikings like Danny Isidora? And if the Vikings like Isidora a lot, and I think that they do, because I shouldn't say that I think that they do. I think that they should, because I like what we saw from Isidora last year, and he has clearly proven that he has the ability to be a mauling run blocker, which is ultimately, I think that's what the Vikings need, is they need a guy that can run block efficiently and then can also pull and get out in space on screens and stuff like that in order to satisfy what John DeFilippo likes to do. So, back to the question here. Yes, I would trade up for Isaiah Wynn. I believe that he's very talented. I believe that he's shown a capacity to do all the things that the Vikings like to do, or, not what the Vikings like to do, but what John DeFilippo has shown he likes to do. So I would make that move to get him. I don't necessarily know if it's necessary from the standpoint of where Danny Isidora stands, but they need two guards right now. And one of them probably should be Isidora. I don't know who the other one is going to be, whether that's Tom Compton or Isaiah Wynn or Billy Price or Will Hernandez or any of these different prospects. But the Vikings need a guard, and so I'm not opposed to trading up for Isaiah Wynn.
Yeah, I'm not terribly opposed either. I guess I would prefer, again, I've talked about Billy Price and that chemistry with Pat Elflein already there. And despite the injury, I'd still rather prefer waiting for him, because that sounds like he's going to be late first round, if not early second round. Kind of a player where he falls, so I would prefer that. But again, Wynn is clearly a star talent. I do worry he's a little bit small, which, depending at guard isn't the worst thing. Obviously, at playing at tackle, you need to be more than 6'2", but at guard is not the worst thing. He's very quick and athletic, so he kind of make up for it there.
Do you have his profile sitting in front of you right now?
Yeah.
How tall? What is his size?
6'2", 313.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, with athleticism too. I mean, I like that combination. I think that's a good fit for what the Vikings are trying to do. His film is outstanding. I mean,
sure.
That's a guy that I've watched, probably more of than most guys, and I really like what I see from Isaiah Wynn. I think that he's a great fit. So, ultimately, to kind of finish off this question and to finish off this show, would you make that trade up to, let's say, 22 to get Isaiah Wynn? You have to. Okay, let me create a hypothetical here. I'm going to make this a little bit easier.
Yeah, let's do that.
So the Vikings have the number 30 pick right now. In order to move up to 22, they'd probably need to trade their first and, let's say, a third. That probably makes the most sense there. So you have to trade a first and a third and possibly a player, a conditional pick, or something of that nature. Would you make that trade to go get Isaiah Wynn at 22?
I think I would, because the Vikings are being rewarded heavily with comp picks next year.
Yeah.
So I think they can kind of make that move and sort of gamble a little bit now, because they can still make up for it in next year's draft, because I think they have 3 third-rounders or something like that next year with Keenum and Bradford and all these guys signing elsewhere, Jerick McKinnon. So I think I would pull the trigger there, where if it's a first, a mid-rounder, and then maybe one other kind of late-round conditional or something like that.
They're in compensatory pick heaven, honestly. I wasn't that's incredible. They should probably consider trading, if they're going to trade up, they should consider trading a 2019 pick, because all the pieces that they do have. So, I think that this becomes more and more definitive the more we talk through it. I would absolutely I would trade up for most of these guys based off what the Vikings have in store for next year with those comp picks. Yeah, I would trade up for a lot of
I'm still
guys.
On Team Billy Price, but I'm not I'd be outrageously upset about trading up for Isaiah Wynn, getting one of the best interior linemen in the draft. So
Absolutely. So that's a good place to end the show there. As always, folks, thanks for listening. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, CastBox. If you're on YouTube right now, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for us. That helps us out quite a bit. Next week, we'll be back here doing more stuff. Some topics that I have on slate here that we may or may not talk about. Blair Walsh worked out with the Miami Dolphins. I thought that was pretty funny. Which Viking player benefits the most from the addition of Kirk Cousins? Maybe a funny hypothetical like we just did. Maybe a little bit more serious one than not, I suppose. And we'll kind of just get back to doing what we've been doing here, talking a little bit of the news that surrounds the team. Hopefully we'll have an answer to Kendall Wright. We can kind of confirm that next show, and then we'll get back into kind of doing some more off-season fun stuff just to finish off, where I guess not finish off, but to continue the offseason into draft season more and more as that gets closer and closer. So thanks as always for listening, and we'll catch you guys later next week.